Have you started recording?
I just pressed record.
Excellent.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to come in. Enjoy our beautiful artwork. Okay, we'll just go ahead and get started. And we are also recording in case people miss and are able to watch later. So thank you everyone for joining today. We are here to learn about Walltown, one of our historical neighborhoods in Durham. Started. So again, thank you for coming. We are recording today. So everything on our slides and our panelists will be recorded, and we will share that recording in a few days after today, and probably also on our website for people who want to watch it in the future. I also wanted to clarify that we are learning in this process. We are learning not only about the history of our communities, but we're also learning how to do webinars. So please be patient with us. This is the first time we've done this webinar. We received over 230 RSVPs, which is really exciting. Feels like a little bit of pressure. Also kind of weird because I'm sitting alone in a room and there are potentially 230 people watching. So again, please be patient with us. If you have any kind suggestions afterwards, we will have a survey, so please let us know how we can make things better. And again, we are talking about history, but history can be a really tricky subject. There's no one who knows everything. So if you have other parts of the story that you want to share, other information, please feel free to write something in the chat or message us afterwards. So we're here today because to learn history, but part of the reason that we're learning about history is because the city of Durham is really trying to be better about having equitable city programs and policies. So one of the key pieces in any kind of city programs and policies is community engagement, because the community that's engaged in shaping the cities and policies, that's who the city and policies reflect. And if we're not actually engaging all of our community in these discussions and shaping the city programs and policies, what we create only ends up reflecting and benefit certain parts of our communities. So within the city of Durham, we're really taking on the work of trying to do equitable community engagement, which means focusing more on our historically and currently marginalized and underrepresented communities. Some of the ways that we're trying to do this are through collaboration, both with our community partners, but also with other city departments. So when you as residents have thoughts about a trail, you probably also have thoughts about potholes or roads or jobs or schools or all those sorts of things. So we're trying to work within the city to make sure that when we engage you as residents, that we're ready to really hear all those things and make sure that we're hearing everything, not just about a one project. One of our other methods that we're working on is community-rooted partners, which is really exciting, and that is working with local community groups to design and lead engagement, and also providing them compensation for this work, because you as community members know best how to engage your communities. So that's been really exciting. And then one of the third things that we're doing under equitable community engagement is this piece of our community stories, because in engaging any community, we need to understand them better, and history is a key part of that. So today we're talking about Walltown. We're going to learn about Walltown. Next month we will be learning about the West End. especially Polly Murray. We'll also be learning about Bragtown in September. And in the future, we'll be learning about Hayti, Crush Street. These are other neighborhoods that we're hoping to learn about. Again, these are historically Black neighborhoods in Durham. If you have suggestions, if you have stories that you would like to be a part of these or contribute, again, we don't have a whole lot of time to hear all of the things, but we want to hear the stories and connect people with other people in the neighborhoods to share those stories. I also do want to recognize that there are communities that lived on these lands before any of us were probably here. There were Native Americans and other communities that lived on these properties. So just recognizing that we know that Black communities are not the only part of Durham or the only part of Durham history, but they are a large part of it, and an area and communities that the city really needs to do better in engagement. So that's why this series currently is focused especially on historically Black neighborhoods. But then obviously, as with any community, it overlaps with lots of other communities like LGBTQ, I'm sure Latinx, youth, communities, lots of different things. So just wanted to recognize that. Today we are featuring Brandon Williams, James Hill, and Audrey Mitchell.
Lawrence.
Call from Lawrence.
How you doing, Mr. Ben?
Also, I just wanted to recognize within communities, sometimes there are digital divides and different understandings of different technical access. So as you may imagine, this has been a really fun experience, getting several different generations together to do a webinar and share this history remotely. So that's kind of all of my introduction, and I will turn it over to Brandon now to lead the discussion around Walltown.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate the opportunity. Glad to be here today with folks from the city and maybe beyond, and with Audrey and James, and just the awesome opportunity to be able to share history of Walltown. So I'm a resident, been in the neighborhood. My name is Brandon Williams. I've been in the neighborhood since 2013 as a resident, and so going on 7-8 years now, which is a really small amount of time when I think about kind of the longevity. The neighborhood is at least 114 or more years old. So been apart for a really small amount of time, but have the gift of having been introduced to the people who grew up and shaped and really gave life to this place through the work that I've done. And so back, it's probably around 2010 when I first met Mr. Hill and Miss Mitchell, in particular through a youth organization called Urban Hope. And one of the things Urban Hope did, had a summer camp for kids in the neighborhood. Every summer, at the beginning of the summer, the elders from the community would come in and share stories about the neighborhood to kind of set the context for staff and people kind of working. Many of the staff were also young people from the neighborhood, to kind of share the history and legacy in hopes that they would be able to kind of understand their work and share that with the next generation of kids that were growing up. And so working at the camp that summer, got to meet and hear from Mr. Hill, Miss Mitchell, and others sharing stories. And those stories really captivated me and drew me closer to kind of what this kind of power of the neighborhood over time was really all about. So had the chance to do that when I moved to the neighborhood, lived into that a little bit further. And so I wanted to be able to today, as an opportunity to share that same gift that was shared with me, to kind of put that out for the city to hear, and to allow the stories that Mr. Hill, Ms. Mitchell will share today to hopefully impact and shape how you all come to understand really the legacy of Walltown and what it means for Durham and beyond. So I'm gonna go through, Mr. Hill's gonna go first today, offer some reflections. Ms. Mitchell, and then I'll come back in the end and share a little bit more about kind of my last 7 years being here. But first, want to just shape just a little bit of context historically and thinking about who Walltown is named after. And so that's a man named George Wall. George Wall was born into slavery in Randolph County around 1854, as far as the records as I can tell. After emancipation, George got a job working at Trinity College in Randolph County. And when Trinity moved to Durham in the 1890s, George was invited to come and continue working for them. He accepted that invitation, came to Durham. Trinity was on what we all know now to be Duke's East Campus. And eventually in the early 1900s, George was settled in the area known as Walltown and built a home there on what is now Onslow Street, what was then 3rd Street. And so that's kind of the community that kind of flourished around George. Lots of other folks working at the university and in the mills at that time became known as Walltown. And so here you have a picture of George on the left there, and then one of his sons, George Frank Wall, who would also go on to work at the university in janitorial maintenance, was there for a long time, and eventually even bequeathed $100 to the university in his will, which is really kind of an amazing story and gift, and thinking about the relationships and dynamics there. So this neighborhood, historically working class neighborhood that is kind of lasted for just long time here. I'm going to let Mr. Hill share some reflections on kind of what life was like growing up in the neighborhood, and some of the significant stories around the first Walltown Community Center, and other things that are real highlights. So Mr. Hill, I'm gonna pass it on to you and let you introduce yourself and take it away.
My name is James Hill, and I've been a resident of Walltown since 1939. When I grew up in Walltown, all of the streets were dirt. And we lived in a true sense of the word community. In other words, each person looked after the next person. We were so tightly knitted that we called no adults by their last name. It was Miss Mary or Mr. John. We were just that close to each other. We had no formality in it. Even our bronze mare, we called him Mr. Frizzell, who was professionally known as Mr. Day. We felt very safe in our community because we looked after our own. And we were a self-contained neighborhood. We had our own school, our grocery store on the corner of Club and 4th Street, which is now Berkeley. We had our barbershops, Mr. Jeff, Roy Lee, and Mr. Frizzell, and several beauty salons, Miss Callie, Miss Vic, Catherine Lunsford, and Miss Gauls, Miss Iola. So we had 4 of those. So we really had nothing. We had our own grocery stores. We had shoe shop. Mr. Walton was our shoe shop man. And we had our little corner store, Sloan, which was across the street from the school. Sloan was where we could go dance in the evening. We really had no need to go out of Walltown for anything because we had it all there, everything that we needed. I remember very vividly on holidays, like on Halloween, they would block off the block, the 1000 block of 2nd Street, which is now Lancaster. And we would have robbing for apples and whatever activities that they had for the children. We would start around 7 o'clock at night and last till about 9 or 10. I remember during the summer, we would all gather on Mr. Fred's truck, who was large enough to ride on the back of the truck, and go to Raleigh to Shavers Park for our annual picnic. Or do you remember that?
Yes.
And during Easter time, we would have an Easter egg hunt, which is now the property of Northgate, where we would have our Easter egg hunt over there every year. And it was just a community event. All the events that I am talking about were community events where everybody pitched in and helped one another. I think for right now, I'm going to turn it over to Audrey. And, oh yeah, the Recreation Center. Y'all bear with me, I'm 80, so I'm kicking but slow. Our first Recreation Center was a house on 5th Street, and that was run by Mr. J.L. Alexander. That stayed we used that until the early 50s, which is the site of now the Walltown Recreation Center. That was originally the city dump. And the city gave it to the Walltown mayor and his council. Say, well, since y'all keep wanting somewhere for you children to play, you take this dump and do what you want to with it. Well, with the children and all, we went in and cleaned that dump up. And was the first site of Walltown Community Center, and was built with a contribution of stones from Duke and labor from the Walltown community. I think Dad and Mr. Fred Black were the masons, and we had one mason that came in from Hickstown, I can't think of his name. Anyway, they were the masons on the job. And the children were the laborers. And we built that recreation center at a free cost to the city and the community. Okay, Audrey.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. In case anyone don't know me, I'm Audrey Mitchell. I also grew up in Walltown, born and raised in Walltown. Right now, I am the president of the Community Association. And piggybacking on what Mr. Hill said, we don't want to repeat everything he said, but going back to the Recreation Center, when it was an incinerator and they cleaned it up, the members of the community cleaned it up, and then they made it a park. It wasn't a building there at first, but it was a park. And we would go and play, and then they built this one-room building that was the Recreation Center. And that lasted for a while. We had a ballpark over there because we had ball players, they definitely had those, and they were very, very good. Walltown, I'm not sure what did they call it, the Walltown Baseball Club or something like that. Yeah, it did come out to be the Walltown Baseball Club, and from that club, and they were very good ball players and very notable around the city and partially the state. And from that Walltown Baseball Club, they came up with a club where Mr. John Love was in charge of it. And each year, after everybody got grown, each year that club would meet July the 4th at the Recreation Center and at the park. And we would have, on July the 4th, we would have a celebration. We would have a parade. We would have a dance at the night. We would have a ball game. The older men would play against the younger guys. And for the whole day, we would just eat out at the park and just enjoy entertainment and recreation and that sort of thing. Our school, Walltown Elementary School, it was called the Rosenwald School because there was a philanthropist who's a white man, came through and built some schools in Durham for the black kids in the communities. And the picture that you see now, the Rosenwald School, what you see down at the bottom is the first Walltown school that was built. And this is the school that we went to, we started out with. The picture above it where you see the children in the classrooms and things, that is, the pictures on the wall is from Walltown. And that picture you will go, if you go to the museum in Washington, D.C., that was built, the Black Museum, that picture is featured in that museum. And if you look over to the left of that, that was also part of the school and the kids and that so forth. So Walltown School changed. When I was in the 3rd grade, we left that school and had to go to East End School in North Durham while they rebuilt Walltown and renovated it. Some of it they kept and they added on to it. So when I got to be in the 4th grade, we came back to our Walltown school. And the school is basically what you're looking at now. If you go into Walltown and you see the Walltown Elementary School, that school is standing there. So what we did. And as Tootie, well, I call him Tootie. Everybody in Walltown had some nicknames. If you were from Walltown, you know that. So Mr. Hill's nickname is Tootie. So if you hear me say Tootie, that's what I'm not used to calling him, Mr. Hill or James. I'm used to calling him Tootie. But the first church was St. John's Church. It wasn't called, the church wasn't called St. John at the time. It was called Olivet, the Olivet Church, I think it was, which was on Green Street. It was a storefront church. And then the church moved down to Wall Street, which was changed to 3rd Street. Now it's Onslow Street. Mr. Wall's house that was built when he built it, and it was a mud, like Mr. Hill said, Tootie said, dirt streets all over the place. So plenty mud when you're walking down the street. And it was Wall Street. That was the name of the street when Mr. Wall built his house. And then it was later changed to 3rd Street. And all the streets in Walltown were numbered. You had 3rd, 4th, 5th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th streets. What we call Walltown today was not what we grew up in Walltown. The areas that we grew up in Walltown was considered 2nd Street, which was some parts of 2nd Street, 3rd Street, which is Onslow, 2nd Street now is Lancaster, 3rd Street, which is now Onslow, Berkeley Street, which used to be 4th Street, which is now Berkeley Street, 5th Street, which is now Sedgefield Street. Now Berkeley and Sedgefield, there were whites in some of those blocks on that street. So it was just maybe like a little square block, several blocks that we would call Walltown, the original Walltown. So it would consist of Onslow. Now I'm gonna use the streets that are called now. Onslow Street from Green Street down to Club Boulevard and goes into the park. Onslow Street, which was the main street, the main drag. On Berkeley Street, you would have half of Berkeley from Green Street, part of Berkeley, because it was white folks lived up toward the beginning of up towards Green Street, blacks towards the end of Berkeley going down path across Knox Street. You go down to Inglewood Street. You go down to Club. You go down to Club, right, and across Club. Sedgefield Street was more divided, integrated. You had some blocks were white, some blocks were black. The blocks that were white, they didn't call themselves Walltown, and we didn't call them Walltown either. So that was it. And there was across, what did you say, Tootie? Yeah, we didn't call those blocks.
Thinking out loud.
Oh, yeah, there was, whether you know it or not, some parts of the 1100 block of Sedgefield was white. Some parts of white. We didn't consider them part of Walltown, and they didn't consider us. I mean, we didn't consider them, and they didn't consider being in Walltown. So that was that. But then you come up Sedgefield going towards Knox Street. There were still whites in that block. And as far as in the 900 block of Sedgefield, there was white folks in that block. So it was kind of sort of chopped up. So when you cross over the Club Boulevard on Sedgefield, then you had blacks in the block. And you going straight down to Guest Road. We didn't call Guest Road going that far down if it's part of Walltown either. So now you have Edgewater Street, which was named Earl Street at the time. So that was black. And then, of course, Berkeley Street, and you had the church over there, which was Northside Baptist Church. And then you had a church that moved over after St. John was established there. This church was called Hicks's Chapel Church, which I think the people from Hickstown was the one that went to that church, and it came over to Walltown. And then the name of it was changed to St. James Church, and that church was on Berkeley Street also. And the what's in there now is the Walltown Children's Theater. So that's what's there now. On Lancaster, Walltown started at Green Street and went down to Club. Across Club, that was all white, and of course across thing about. Later on, in fact, in the beginning, since Mr. Wall was working on the East Campus, and he had to walk through and come down to his house on Wall Street, well, the block between Markham Avenue and Green was all white. But back then, they considered that as Walltown too. That was part of Walltown because Mr. Wall had to travel through that direction. So all of those streets on Berkeley and Sedgefield and all of that, well, they called it Walltown. At least the city did. It considered it as Walltown. We didn't, and they didn't either, because it was all white. But I think as far as the city was concerned, and if I'm not mistaken, someone can correct me, that might have been in a set of map where it was a part of Walltown at the same. But eventually, the white folks on that end decided that they didn't want to be considered as Walltown, so they changed their name to Trinity Heights. So that's how Trinity Heights was born. But then, as Mr. Hill was saying, in Walltown, we were all considered family. Everybody knew everyone, and that was that. It was a time and an era where you weren't afraid to leave your doors open at night. You can go to sleep, and your doors would be open all night long. We were not a rich neighborhood, not even considered a middle-class neighborhood. We were considered a poor neighborhood, but we didn't know, the children, we didn't know we were poor, because we had so much love in our neighborhood and so much togetherness. So it was, to us, we were fine. We were self-contained. We didn't have to go out the neighborhood for anything. Mr. Frizzell was our mayor, which we called the Bronx mayor. He worked downtown at the Baldwin
Courthouse.
No, the courthouse. He worked at the courthouse. So whatever they did have a city council and a mayor of Durham and all like that. And if Walltown needed anything, Mr. Day would go and petition for the community to get what we would need in the community and that sort of thing. That's how we could get the streets paved and get some sidewalks done and all like that, through Mr. Frizzell going down petitioning for us. And as Mr. Tudor said, we had our stores in the community. Mr. Johnson had a store over there on Berkeley Street too. And there were several stores, and just several areas we had. And eventually we had a washette where Sloan's place used to be. Finally, it came to be a washette. So we had our little nightclub there too, that was right down from Sloan, right in the middle of the block on Club, excuse me, between Berkeley and Onslow. In the middle of the block was another little store there, and it was a little club in the basement. So we had our entertainment too. We always had games at the park at night, so we would go there. We were not afraid. We would walk the streets. We knew everybody. Most of the people planted their gardens, and whatever came out of the garden, they shared it with the neighbors and their friends and their family. So we didn't really want for anything. And believe it or not, even though we were in the city, we had some goats in the neighborhood as well. Chickens, roosters, and all that, but we were still considered the city. But we did have those things in the neighborhood. We had a bunch of fruit trees and things over in the neighborhood. So we had a lot of things. Eventually, as the years grew by and the people grew up and we grew up, we were still very, very tight-knit community. We respected each other. We enjoyed each other. As we grew up to respect our elders. As Tudor said, we called every Mr. and Mrs. We would say no, thank you, not no yes. We would say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And if anybody saw us out of order or doing something we weren't supposed to do, they could whip us. Our parents did not get angry, did not want to go down and start fighting. You hit my child. No. They would come to our parents and say, your child was doing such and such a thing, so I had to give them a whipping and spank them. Your parents would thank them from doing it, and then you get another whipping because of what you did. So that's just the way it was. We was just one big happy family. And I think one of the reasons why we didn't allow people to come in our community to do anything. You didn't come in to cause any confusion or anything. And there are many days when I grew up on Onslow, Wall Street, and right there by St. John's Church, many nights and many days I would see people running past our house, leaving because the Walltown men would chase them out of the neighborhood. You just didn't come into our neighborhood unless you was invited in, because we didn't want any confusion over there. If there was going to be a fight, it was going to be among us and not somebody else coming in there starting one. So that's just the way it was. And I enjoyed growing up in Walltown. I'm still in Walltown. I enjoyed growing up in Walltown. I will never forget Walltown. Walltown is my home, and that's all there is to it. And I'm just thankful that I grew up in Walltown and got the upbringing that I did from Walltown and from all the other people in Walltown. So I am very thankful, and I'm very proud of being in Walltown. And right now we are trying to continue to do things to uplift Walltown and to keep some of the sacred things that we knew about Walltown in place. I know you all see a lot of things that's happening, and a lot of these houses being built that we don't like to see there, which causes people's property taxes to rise and all that sort of thing. We would like to keep some things intact, and especially the house that you see there, Mr. Wall's house, and we want to keep that preserved because it's a historical place, and we want to do it. We still have some other historical sites that some of them may not be there now, like Mr. Frizzell Day's house is still there. We want to keep that there and make mentioning of what it is, and that was the mayor's house and that sort of thing. The barber shop that you see, which was on Knox Street, that St. John Church owned that barber shop. Now we want to keep that there. That was a momentum also. And some things have been torn down, but that we can look at the history, preserve it, and maybe put a plaque there or something and say, this is what was there. Because some people need to know where things were. If it's torn down, you need to know where these things were. And the first principal of Walltown that I remember, Mr. Davis, his house is still standing on the corner of Lancaster and Club. What you say, Tootie?
Miss Cleo Russell.
Yeah, Miss Cleo Russell was the first one. Yeah, she was Miss Cleo Russell. And there are some pictures of those teachers that were there.
Cleo Russell?
Yeah, the teachers that were there. Miss Cleo Russell. Yeah.
Miss
She
Cleo
was
the first grade teacher. Her mama was the principal.
Who?
Miss Cleo was the first grade teacher.
Right.
Her mother was the principal.
Her mother was the principal. Right,
Yeah,
right.
So I have just a question for the two of you as we just, in this moment, Ms. Mitchell, you talked about kind of how trying to maintain both the legacy of the neighborhood historically, but also trying to preserve some of the actual homes and folks who still live there in the way in which, we're being impacted by, development in the city, the rise in property taxes.
Hold on just a minute. Hold on, Brandon. I got to, about the news. Okay.
One of the stories here, looking at the slide from the rec center, I was grateful for Mr. Hill, you telling the story of how that originally, the first one was built, right? That there was the incinerator that sat there across Club, but you're kind of given those, so to speak, right? Like, we'll give you the incinerator, we'll give you the garbage dump for the city, and right, you make something out of that. There's that phrase kind of in Black history, Black culture, making something out of nothing, making a way out of no way. And very much the legacy of Walltown speaks of that to me, in terms of the things you're given, but you make something beautiful and wonderful out of it. And so that the residents create this one room center that becomes the first center for, I think one of the first in the city of Durham, right? And you do it free, like it's not no money investment, but you do it out of kind of what you know that you need for your community. And then the new center that is then built, again, comes from the kind of organizing and persistence and push of neighbors. If I'm correct, it took probably another, once that original one room building was kind of no longer really viable, you all began to push for a new center. It took almost 20 years to get that center, get funding for that center. Is that right, Ms. Mitchell?
The one room that the people built in the center, and then back in probably 1957 or so, the city of Durham did build another, added on to that one room. That made it so we had basically two rooms and an office and a little kitchen. They did build onto that. After that, it took about 20 years for us to get the center that you see standing there now. Those groundbreakings that you see, if people are looking, that you see, the one in the middle by the stone wall, that's the one where the council members were, and the mayor is standing there doing groundbreaking to get that building that you see, to add it on to that, what you see. The one on the left is the groundbreaking for the new recreation center that you see now. So yeah, we had that one room. Then the city did add, we didn't, the city did come in and they added on another room to it to make it larger and an office to it.
That's helpful. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, has been powerful for me, and I know many others who have come to Walltown, is to kind of be able to enter into that history and story of what's happening. And so I wanted to draw, go back to the redlining map. Wanted to draw some attention, folks are asking what's happening today, and thinking about kind of the way in which you all described kind of where the neighborhood was. And I think you can see here, so the map that is seen here is 1937 kind of housing policy, kind of near the Northgate Mall area, what would become the Northgate Mall area. And so Walltown there in red, in this area here, and what you see kind of the distinctions that Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Hill made around kind of what historically was the neighborhood. So that kind of, you can see it kind of almost in the redlining, right? That this is kind of the historical area where, Black folks used to live. But the black bolded line now is what the city considers the Walltown neighborhood, right? So it expanded over the years. It's expanded. I mean, one of the things that I think for folks who don't know about redlining, that this is kind of the federal kind of policies around mortgage investments, banking investments in neighborhoods. And so areas that are redlined, and you'll see some of the other red neighborhoods here are historically Black neighborhoods in Durham, that those neighborhoods were given a red line to say that they were not going to get investments. So you couldn't get the kind of bank loans, mortgages that other folks were receiving at the time. So this is the time the FHA is taking off in the country, and many folks, the birth of the middle class really through the ability to own your own home. So that was denied to historically Black neighborhoods, as you can tell from this map right here. And then the shift would be that to today, when we look at this is a property value change map looking at the Walltown neighborhood. Again, you can see the bolded line that Walltown's been one of the hardest areas hit by the rise in property taxes. So you can see kind of the legend and change. The dark blues, dark greens, magentas are the higher changes. And when you look at the surrounding communities, that Walltown's been hit the hardest by that. So this kind of history of disinvestment has then led to the point where these neighborhoods are the ones being hit hardest by gentrification. And I think it speaks to me too. Mr. Hill, you were talking about streets that were paved and unpaved, and maybe you all can correct me if I'm not about this. You can tell by some of the curbs in and around the neighborhood, kind of what streets were paved at one time, because they still have the kind of square curbing, you know, like kind of new curbs are like rounded, but the streets that have like the square edges were like the older streets that had been paved, you know, and then the streets that weren't paved historically got paving later. Does that ring true to either of you all? Like that, when you had some streets were paved and some were not paved, right?
Well, Club Boulevard and B Street, which is now Green,
Right.
they were paved. They came through Walltown,
Okay.
but
Right.
they were traveled by white people.
Right.
That was the main drag that white people used. That's the only reason they were paved.
Right.
Now, the streets that we used primarily were dirt.
Not paved. They were dirt. Correct.
So the curb gutters, I mean, are the ones that really represent where we lived.
Gotcha.
Right.
Because other than in that little block, from 5th Street down to 2nd Street, there were no blacks on Club.
That's right.
And on Green Street, there weren't any blacks at all
That's right.
during my time.
My time either. That's
So
right.
they were not considered a part of Walltown, even though they came through Walltown.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
So we had a couple of questions. Where do you want to know when the streets changed over from the numbered streets to named streets? Like how that?
I was in college, so it had to be in the late 50s.
It was. I can't remember what year it was, but I remember it changed from Wall Street to the 3rd Street and on like that. I don't remember exactly what year it was. Maybe someone that's listening in may know that information, because I'm pretty sure there are some Walltowners that are listening in and can contribute to some things that we may have forgotten and don't know about, you know, and remember, or can add to what we're saying. And if so, I wish they would put it in the chat.
Yeah, some people are responding in the chat.
In the chat and saying that, you know, what it is, because but I don't recall exactly what. I'm trying to think. What was the? It wasn't changed when I started school. When I started Walltown School, that was in like 1954.
It was changed around after 57. I went away to school in 57, and then while I was in college, it was changed.
It was changed
from
right.
3rd Street to Onslow Street.
To Onslow Street, yeah. So that's about, that may be about right. Somewhere right in that time.
So I'm just gonna highlight. We'll do some Q&A here. I wanted to go back to the house because we were talking about kind of the change in the neighborhood. And so this house here on Onslow Street now is the original house that George Walt built. And one of the big kind of ways that we keep the history of the neighborhood alive is through what's called the Walltown Reunion. Mr. Kill, Ms. Mitchell, and other folks back in the mid-2000s, I think 2006, 2005 was when the first reunions kicked off. And it's an event in the summer, a weekend typically, where there's a parade and kind of a celebration party night. There's a worship service at one of the churches, and they have shirts that come out every year. And so last year, the Walltown Reunion shirt said established 1906. And so I was trying to get some understanding about kind of where that 1906 comes from. And what I learned was that's when, that's the year, I think, on the title deed for the house,
right.
when George Walt built the house. So the house is still here on Onslow, still owned by the family, the Walt family. And one of the things, the juxtapositions that is very glaring now is across the street from this house on Onslow, there's a new home in the neighborhood that's under contract for over $1 million, just over $1 million. And so when you think about kind of the who is able to afford that, think about the history of this being a working class neighborhood, and the kind of, again, the impact of the property taxes, folks who have owned their homes, lived here for a long time, many who might be retired, that those increase in property taxes is really detrimental to them. And we recognize this, and I think that the neighborhood has been trying to come back to our map to think about kind of how does the development in our city happen in a way that allows us to preserve those folks to own their homes, keep those homes, not be pushed out. And one of the recent initiatives that we've undertaken as a community association is around the redevelopment of Northgate Mall. And so many folks probably know that the mall situated here is been sold and is undergoing redevelopment. We want to make sure that it happens in a way that does not continue to exacerbate the impact on people who've lived in the neighborhood for a long time, and we're able to preserve that, not just the legacy, but like the actual people that are still here, that they won't be forced out. So there's going to be some information at the end where you'll be able to see a slide for some contact information to follow up with Ms. Mitchell or myself to get involved in that. We've been working for the last year or so on some efforts, and one of the things is to get a property tax assistance program going for our neighborhood. There's been some relief in the city, but that had not been extended to Walltown. So we're pushing the county commissioners right now to do some of that, to ensure that people and families can keep those homes, particularly those that have been there for such a long time. And so we can maintain that connection. I mean, that folks coming in, to the neighborhood, we know that things change over time, and new people will come in. We want to be able to introduce folks to the history, introduce them to the people who've grown up there, and so trying to really mitigate and lessen this impact of gentrification on the neighborhood in that way. We have just a few more minutes. We're going to stop at 12:55 and hand it back to Laura. Won't get to all the questions. Go ahead, Audrey.
Let me say something. What you're talking about is all well and good, and there's a lot of things that we are trying to do. I saw a question where Jessica was asking, what are we going to do about the Wall House? We have been meeting with the planning department. We have met several times with the planning department, with the preservation. I think April Johnson is still in charge of that, but we've met with the preservation department and all, trying to see what we can do to preserve the Wall House, and keep it there and not let it get torn down or anything. So just know that we are working on that. For all of you who are concerned about that, to know that we are also working on other areas, other sites in the community that we want to preserve it as being, historical for us, that we knew about and what we're thinking. So if you have any ideas or any questions or anything, don't hesitate to email me or Brandon about what you think we should do or how we could go about doing it. We can use your input and we can use your help. Because after all, we are a community association, and that includes all of you. Not only just the people walk and work that live in the neighborhood, but that includes those people that grew up in the neighborhood who still have an invested interest in the neighborhood. So I would love to hear from all of you. And Algin, you out there listening, and you got a wealth of information and you have a wealth of knowledge, call me. Email me, contact me, because I like to hear, I know a lot of things that you have, and you probably have a lot of pictures and things and information that we can use, and that we can, with Laura and Fallon and Cheryl and all of them, that we can share and get things done. So thanks, Brandon, for what you're saying, because we are working on a lot of those things right now.
No, thank you. And I just a few moments left, so I just want to leave Mr. Hill. Are there some closing words, anything you'd like to say or share before we hang off here?
You know, I've often been asked how the Walltown reunion has been so successful over the years. And it's merely because of the unity that the community had back in the 40s and 50s. Most of us, we have some newcomers, but most of us who were running the Walltown reunion grew up here back in the 40s and 50s. Therefore, we have a different view of the community itself, and we love the community. And we want to see that as many people get back together as possible every year. And we've been very successful in that. Out of that has grown the Amy E. Kelly Scholarship Fund, which is going along pretty good. We've gone from giving a kid $200 a year to now we're giving a kid a stipend of $1,500 a year. So that has gotten off the ground and is doing well in the community. So we're still doing some things that relate back to the way the community was years ago.
Yeah, it's great. It's what's brought me here and kept me here, standing on the shoulders of folks you all have paved the way. And so I thank you for taking the time today to share with people here in the city. And you and Ms. Mitchell, this has been a great opportunity for folks to hear some and hopefully want to learn more. As we said, these are just snippets of the larger story of the community, but we're grateful for the opportunity to share a bit here today and hope that you all will continue to seek out more information and build relationships with people. If you're in the neighborhood, you know, get to know your neighbors and listen and hear these stories. Join us in the work that we have, and we're grateful. So thank you, Laura. I'll pass it back to you. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Hill, again for your time today.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Tootie. In all of our practice runs, I didn't realize that Tootie was your nickname. So now I know. So excited. Now I can't wait to find out what Ms. Mitchell's name is.
I didn't have a nickname.
Oh, okay. Sure. We'll see about that. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Just a reminder, if you weren't here at the very beginning, again, we're learning more about the history, but also we were learning about this technology. So if there were any blips in that, please thank you for sticking with us. We will also be sending out a brief survey at the sometime today, just asking what you liked about this, what we can do to improve, and other things that the city can do to improve engagement. So if you have suggestions of other topics, other community engagement tactics, other histories that we should share, please let us know there. Here are just a few more ways to continue to stay engaged. So here's contact information for Ms. Mitchell, for Brandon. And again, we can share all of this out also when we share the survey information. This is a link to the website that Brandon also put in the chat, where they've been working with DataWorks, and that included, that's the source of some of the maps that he shared at the end. A reminder that we have the West End and Bragtown neighborhoods coming up in August and September. We'll also send emails to remind you of that, and include the links to today's recording. And at what's cut off at the bottom is if you want to learn more about equitable community engagement, to get in touch with me, and pretty much all these emails will be coming from me and your RSVP and stuff. So you should have my contact information if you have any questions. I'd want to say thank you to everyone who helped to make this happen. I'm probably leaving some names out, but just Cheryl McDonald, Fallon Thompson with the city, Jenny, Toya Merritt, and Sharon Williams, and then of course Brandon, Audrey, and James. I really appreciate it. And all of the people that Mr. Hill called on the phone yesterday when we were trying to clarify information, and Algin, as Audrey mentioned, who's already emailed and shared a lot of stories. So we're really excited to see what comes from this and all the other connections and histories and stories that we learn. So thank you, everyone. Have a good
May I
day.
say
Have a good
thank
week.
you, Laura, and thank you,
Laura.
Laura, and everybody that was associated with this to put this forward. Thank you so very much.
I did want to add one thing. If you have photos, so we shared a lot of photos in today's presentation, but when I was trying to find more, there weren't a lot of photos. I couldn't find a photo easily of the Bronze Mayor for Zell Day. I found where the Carolina Times is digitized, so there are a lot of resources there. But if you have, more photos of Mr. Day, of the original Walltown Recreation Center, any other photos, please let us know, because that's other things that we would like to share.
Okay.
So,
All
for the artwork,
Walltowners, yeah.
yes.
Let me say that all Walltowners, those that have pictures, look and see what you have. Your parents might have left some for you, or sister or brother. We need to know them, and I know there are plenty of pictures of Mr. Frizzell's Day and of the old recreation center somewhere that somebody
And its council.
share it with, and the council, right? So if you have all of that information, please share it with us. Get in touch with me. Get in touch with Brandon. Share it with us. Or Laura, you got yours on there, huh?
If
Yes.
you look at one of St. John's homecoming book, Mr. Frizzell and his council is in there.
Yeah, I have to look. I think I got one of those books, and I'll look in there and let you see that. Yeah.
Okay.
And I did want to say thank you to Gary for the artwork, and thank you for
Very
Brandon
nice. So thank you
for connecting with us with that. The photo or the artwork for George Wall that we were able to use to promote this event is really awesome. So I really appreciate that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
No.
Boom.
We still on?
Yep.
I think we are. I have to find
The
it.
Holy Church.
I see the attendees leaving, which is good. You guys did so great. Mr.